Hi, and welcome back to Beans and Bezels. Norqain is a relatively new Swiss watch brand, and a micro brand by most definitions. I learned about their watches about a year and a half ago, and I wasn't too keen on them initially, but I happened to visit one of their ADs earlier this year and I tried on most of their collection. I was blown away by their quality and finishing, and their prices felt reasonable to me based on what is being delivered. Unfortunately, for someone with a small collection like mine, I avoid owning multiple watches of a similar style, and I found the Adventure Sport to be very similar to my Tudor Black Bay that I've had for about 6 years now. So when Paul offered to send me his brand new Norqain Adventure Sport to review, I couldn't refuse. This watch has a retail price of around $2,050 on the metal bracelet, but if you time your purchases right, you can get between 20 to 25% off on these watches. That puts them in the $1,500 to $2,000 price range, which is a competitive market for luxury watches, but as you'll see, this watch definitely delivers. Let's check it out. I measured the case to be 42.8 millimeters in diameter measured across the case width, 50 millimeters from lug tip to lug tip, and 12.5 millimeters in height. The case is primarily brushed with some polished accents and elements. The case design is pretty conservative and is similar to the silhouette of the Tudor Black Bay with a few minor differences. Unlike the slab of metal mid-case section of the Black Bay, the Norqain's mid-case is slightly narrower and curves down into a pair of lugs that have polished edges. The lug width on both watches is 22 millimeters. The case flanks slightly differ because of the polished nameplate on the Norqain, which I really like as it balances out the typical case asymmetry caused by the 3 o'clock crown. You can also get an engraved nameplate if you like. The Norqain has a 60-click unidirectional bezel that has a well-executed knurled grip and is easy to grip and operate. The bezel action is great too with no backplay. The bezel is pretty tall compared to the Black Bay, but it's definitely easier to use in comparison. The Black Bay has some backplay, but that could just be a side effect of being abused for 6 years, and I wasn't as picky about my watches back then to remember what it was like. Both watches have ceramic inserts with Lume pips. I think I prefer the Arabic numerals on the insert of the Black Bay, since it is a bit more intuitive, even if you're using it only to time frozen pizza in the oven. The Norqain has a signed screw-down crown at the 3 o'clock position with a well-machined grip. I prefer the large crown on the Black Bay compared to the 6mm diameter crown on the Norqain. But the crown operating experience on the Norqain is better than the Tudor. I'd place it midway between the Black Bay and my Submariner. Flipping it over, you have a screw-down case back with a large exhibition window. The movement is clean and nice to look at, but I would trade the exhibition window for increased water resistance if I had a choice, as this watch is rated for only up to 100 meters of water resistance compared to the 200 meters on the Black Bay. I think the dial will be a hit or a miss for most people, given the bold use of texture. The base of the dial has what appears to be a machine-pressed guilloche pattern, and I think it works well on the grey and black dials in particular. The finishing is excellent here. There is an outer minute track that has a plain grey background with printed large ticks for the minutes and small ticks for the milliseconds. The quality of printing is excellent and I couldn't find any faults here. The Tudor has a simpler pattern with only minute markers. Both watches have applied indices but are designed very differently. The Norqain chooses to use more polished stainless steel with larger faceted surfaces, whereas the Tudor has very little metal exposed and the finishing is a simple high polish. But as we'll see later on, this works in favor of the Black Bay where Lume is concerned. The finishing on both are good with minor particles, but I'd say that the Norqain probably takes more work and stricter quality control to get right. The texture on the Norqain dial makes printing more challenging, and Norqain took the easy way out here and printed their logo and text on raised flat surfaces. I think it works fine for the logo under the 12 o'clock, but I'm not a fan of the way the text above the 6 o'clock is executed. I would have preferred if it was printed onto perfectly machined raised sections for the text only. The hands on the Norqain are well designed and well finished, with all three hands containing loomed elements. The hour and minute hands are dual faceted and play with light better than the Tudor. The finishing is good and comparable to the Tudor. No complaints from me regarding the dimensions of the hands on either watch. They're easy to read and both the minutes and seconds hands hit their respective markers. Overall, I like the dial on the Norqain. I think it is well finished and has an interesting design. It differs significantly from the Tudor in this area, with the Tudor having a more classic and constrained dive watch dial design. So I think it'll come down to what kind of design you prefer, because they're pretty much exactly the same in terms of finishing and quality control. The lume on this watch isn't going to win any awards for longevity, and this might be the only area of weakness for this watch. It looks to me like BGW9, but according to their website, all the loomed elements are C1 superluminova, and all the indices and hands are loomed too. The circular pip on the bezel is also loomed and is surprisingly bright. The hands appear to be more generously loomed than the indices and have better longevity. And the circular pip seems to be the most generously loomed element on this watch, which is a bit surprising. The black bay outshines it initially and also outlasts it in the time-lapse comparison, but the indices and hands on the black bay are just better designed to hold more loom, so it has a clear advantage here. The quality and finishing of the bracelet is excellent. The links have a twin polished inner section and brushed outer pieces. I'm not a huge fan of polished center links because of how easily they get scratched, but from a design perspective I think it works here. The links are screw based and taper from 22mm at the lugs to around 19mm at the clasp. I don't have any extensive experience with Tudor's bracelets, so I won't make any comparisons here, but for the price, the Norqain bracelet feels very well done. The clasp looks awesome and continues the same excellent finishing. It has 4 micro adjustment slots that are hidden from the outside. The manufacturing feels solid and reminds me of the clasp on the Formex Reef that was manufactured by Bezels. With brands like Monta and Formex leading the pack in the sub $2,000 bracelet category, I think Norqain should consider upgrading their clasp to feature an on-the-go quick adjustment system. Lastly, the end link fitment is perfect with absolutely no wiggle, and the end link and case design allows for the overall width of the case to shrink from 50mm at the lug tips to around 48.8mm from end link to end link, so good stuff here. Both the Norqain and my Tudor have an ETA 2824-2 movement. A year or two after the ETA model was released, the Black Bay was upgraded to feature their in-house Kenissi movement. Similarly, some of the latest Norqain models are using movements manufactured by Kenissi as well. Lots of similarities here, but let's get back to the movement. I have had more good experiences than bad with the ETA 2824-2, so no real complaints from me here. I put it on my time grapher and observed roughly plus 6 seconds per day in the dial up position and plus 3 seconds per day in the crown up position. All good numbers and quite well regulated. The movement itself is very clean and is reasonably well decorated with an interesting finishing on the rotor. I'm not convinced that this watch needed an exhibition window, but at least you're getting something that was well finished. While the 42.8mm diameter is on the larger side of watches that I'd buy for myself, and the lug tip to lug tip is about 50mm, the articulating bracelet width is 48.8mm and a bit narrow on the Cordura strap, so it ends up fitting quite nicely even on my modest 6¼ inch wrist. The flat case back is another step in the right direction and grounds this watch perfectly on the wrist, making it a comfortable watch to wear with its 12.5mm overall height. It is a big watch though, but the size has been carefully considered and balanced by a clever lug design and an appropriate case height. No complaints from me here, and if anything, they deserve some praise for making a large watch accessible to narrower wrists too. A Tudor watch is often seen as a more affordable means to experience quality watchmaking without the baggage that comes with the hype and extravagance that is often associated with Rolex. One is not a substitute for the other, but the Tudor does a great job in its market segment, and I won't deny that. But Tudor has exploded in popularity and is being put on a pedestal the same way that Rolex is. And the reasons that drove people away from Rolex and towards Tudor now apply to Tudor as well, with their use of waitlists and dealer lobbying, etc. I don't want to make this review about any of those issues. However, I will say that if you're not interested in the hype and glamour associated with the Tudor watch, but you want a high quality watch that lacks any and all pretense, you should look at Norqain. They're doing things right. And for a new brand in a difficult market segment, they've definitely earned my respect. And if you time your purchases right, you can get these watches at close to 20 to 25% off, which is an incredible value proposition in my opinion. As always, thanks for watching and don't forget to read my other reviews in the link below.